You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Aviva Nirenberg, an ADHD coach in my neck of the woods, Monsey, New York. We talked about the unique experiences and challenges of women with ADHD, including its likelihood of not being noticed or diagnosed, the different way it tends to present in women, the value of advocacy, the distinctive impact of ADHD-related social challenges for women, as well as the challenges specific to the Orthodox Jewish community, some specific strategies she has helped her clients learn to implement, and a lot more. Before we begin with the episode, I'd like to tell you about another podcast I listen to called the Chinuch Today Podcast. The host of the Chinuch Today Podcast is former ADHD Heroes podcast guest, Rabbi Yerachmiel Garfield, Menahel of Yeshiva Torah Semes of Houston, Texas. Rabbi Garfield interviews a wide range of creative thinkers who are already implementing their valuable innovations in the world of education, including a unique anti-bullying program, an outdoor leadership training program, a science curriculum that highlights seeing the hand of God in science, and a lot more. If you'd like an ad for your product here on the ADHD Heroes Podcast, you can send us an email at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Now to the regular episode. Enjoy! Hey, Aviva Nirenberg, welcome to the ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Okay, so let's begin with a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So my name is Aviva Nirenberg, and I've been a full-time ADHD coach since 2017. I was originally trained at ADCA for coach training. I also did their family training program to support families and parents, children with ADHD and children. I later now I'm actually in the process of doing additional coach training as a health and wellness coach, because I realized pretty early on with ADHD coaching how important those lifestyle habits are for ADHD functioning, like the diet, exercise, sleep piece. And while I was doing this training, I kind of had this like light bulb moment that I had recalled. I don't know if you're familiar with the work Russell Barkley did, the study he published about ADHD and life expectancy.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, so I'm like, you know what? The reason life expectancy is shorter for people with ADHD is not because of anything inherent in ADHD, but it's because of those lifestyle habits. It's because of the executive function struggles and difficulty in maintaining the healthy habits. So I realized like that combination could really support my clients. So in the process over the years, I earned my PCAC credential from PAC and my PCC credential from the International Coaching Federation. But even more than that, the reason I'm really here and doing this is because of my family story. Even though for the record, I do not have ADHD, I have 3 adult children with ADHD as well as my husband. So when they were diagnosed, I was really looking for ways to support them better and looking for resources. And in that quest, I discovered coaching. I really actually had no idea what coaching was when I first got started. But, during the training, I realized how powerful it was and how powerful a tool it can be as part of ADHD treatment. So that's, basically, how I came to coaching. And because of that emphasis on the wellness piece, my coaching is a very holistic focus, looking at the whole person focus for ADHD coaching.
Very interesting. What age were your kids and husband when they got diagnosed?
So my daughter was 14, and she's the youngest of my kids. And it was interesting because we've been living in Israel, and there she was in a very big class and of 30 plus girls. And because on the outside, and this will get into probably what we're going to be speaking about more later, but because on the outside she was very successful. She was a straight A student. She didn't cause problems in class. It got missed. There was no reason for the teacher to complain or notice anything. I saw her messy backpack. I saw her room. I saw the struggle to keep her notebooks together. But I was dismissed by professionals. They're Mrs. Nirenberg. Your daughter's a straight A student. What do you want from me?
Right.
So it got pushed aside for another few years until we were living in an out of town community back in America, and she had only 12 kids in her class, and there the teacher was able to notice more of that struggle behind the scenes.
Oh, very interesting.
So after she was diagnosed, I kind of put two and two together and realized that even though everyone in my family presented a little bit differently, that my boys who also had inattentive ADHD, which, can go under the radar, had ADHD as well as my husband. So it took a while, because everyone showed up differently, but it made a huge difference when we really had an idea what we were dealing with, all the challenges they were struggling with.
Very incredible. Glad you were able to, facilitate their success.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, because I know what it's like to struggle and not know what you're dealing with. I remember taking all these parenting classes and not understanding why so many of the techniques were not working for my kids. And it just, it helped me to put things in perspective once I understood that they were a little bit different. They're great kids, but they were a little bit different than the typical.
Right. So having those expectations is an entirely different world. Meaning, when you know what to expect, when they're doing something that throws you off a little bit, it's okay. That's to be expected, even if it's not expected.
Right.
If that makes
Right.
any sense.
100%.
But
Yeah, 100%. It gives you a lens to look at. It gives you like a perspective to really understand them better.
right. It's not their fault. It's not your fault. It's just a reality that we have to learn.
100%.
Okay. So getting into our topic for today, what challenges do girls and women experience with regard to the diagnostic process of ADHD?
Yeah, this is a really important question because ADHD in women and girls is really underdiagnosed and sometimes misdiagnosed. And mainly because 90% of girls and women show up as the inattentive type of ADHD, which is that dreamy, maybe overly emotional ADHD. And in a classroom setting, which is where most boys are diagnosed, it's not noticed, like I was mentioning with my daughter, especially if they're high functioning, especially if they're doing well academically. And the 10% of girls and women that have the hyperactive type, they are picked up as early as the boys. So because of that, that it's harder to spot the ADHD in girls and women. They can struggle for years. In fact, I came across an interesting statistic recently. The average age of diagnosis for women is 43, which was shocking to me, but at the same time, not so shocking because I see when women come to me, they're in their 40s or 50s, and often it's when their own kids are diagnosed and like, oh, wow, this sounds like me when they're reading through the diagnostic criteria,
Sure, we
and
know
they'll
that
get
one.
the diagnosis then. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I've seen even 3-generation diagnoses. Like the grandchild is getting diagnosed, the mom will realize, oh, wow, I have ADHD. And then she'll say, Dad, you know what? I think you also have ADHD. And it
Wow.
happens so often. And it's like this big light. And I've seen it in my family as well. Even though I don't have ADHD, I see it on both sides. And there were some not official diagnoses, but some noticing of ADHD traits once we had figured that out in our family. I know it happens in other families as well. So that's one thing. It's harder to spot. So it gets passed over many times. And also a lot of times women are misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression, or underdiagnosed, meaning like they might have anxiety and depression, but they're missing the ADHD. Or it can also be that they have ADHD that no one's picking up. And because it's not being treated, the consequence is anxiety. The consequence is that stress. The consequence is feeling like a failure and depression. So that's the toll of one of the tolls of undiagnosed ADHD. And the other real challenge with women and diagnoses is that women, more so than men, tend to mask. They tend to like hide their differentness, behind a mask of normalcy. And this can happen for girls and for women. And so it also can be missed. Like on the outside, the woman seems so successful, but inside she's really struggling.
Right. Is there, I guess, any explanation for why, or known explanation for why there are more women with inattentive presentation than men, percentage-wise?
Yeah, I'm not really aware of there being like a biological explanation, other than maybe I would say that like in general, boys and men are more active. I don't know. Like that is an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I do not know the answer to that. Yeah, it could be hormonal. I don't know.
Right.
It's a super question.
Thanks.
We'll
Yeah.
have to ask our medical specialist that one.
Yeah. Maybe research will turn something up. Okay. So with regard to this getting overlooked, is there something that a caring family member, a teacher, a friend can help with, or something people should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so I think the most powerful way they can help is through education to know how ADHD looks in girls and women. You're not looking at that typical hyperactive boy. We have that image of, the boy can't sit still, is blurting out in class. It looks very different in most girls and women. So to recognize it's that daydreamy, sometimes messy, sometimes very sensitive, overly emotional, and to know that's how it looks, especially for teachers, because they're often the first line, of noticing the ADHD in schools, because teachers, they have a lot to contend with, but it doesn't take much to be able to spot the signs. It just takes that education. Another key, I think, is really advocacy. If you think you're showing ADHD symptoms, if you think your daughter, your wife, your sister, a friend or loved one is showing these symptoms, is to let them know, um, and push for an accurate diagnosis, because I've seen time and time again, for me personally, in our family, and with many people that have come to me, that women are dismissed, because they look like they're so successful on the outside. So it's important to just advocate, and if you think that's what it is, to get a full diagnosis by a qualified professional.
Got it. So is that what that push looks like? Meaning, does the dismissal come from somebody who maybe doesn't specialize in ADHD, or coming from maybe a primary care physician, and then they dismiss it, and then
So yeah, it can even be by psychiatrists. It can even be by, therapists. But no, for sure, if you go to someone that's known for their ADHD as an ADHD professional, not just a psychiatrist, I don't think it would be dismissed. But we had an our experience. It was a neurologist. I've seen people go to psychiatrists. I've seen people go that are in therapy for many years, especially marital therapy. I've seen many times in marital therapy that a couple is really struggling, and the therapist is not picking up that ADHD is such a big part of the equation. So I think there's a lot more awareness now, because so much is online. You could take these online, I wouldn't advise people diagnose themselves online per se, but it's a good guideline to see, where your symptoms match up with typical ADHD diagnostic symptoms, and to say, look, there are 20 traits here, and I have 18 of them, or
right.
something like that. So it is valuable in that, and it is true that a lot of people are learning that they might have ADHD from listening to TikTok, or watching Instagram and watching videos, but it's not the way to diagnose. But there is some good information out there. Yeah,
Got it.
it's that advocacy is just, if you think that's what it is, it's just really to push and to question.
Right. I mean, keep pushing until you find the professional who has the most expertise. So you'd say,
If you can, yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, right. If you can, I mean, it is sometimes hard to find, the the professionals that really specialize in ADHD, and some of them could have very long waiting lists or be prohibitively expensive.
Right.
But ask for recommendations. There are referral agencies. There are enough resources that someone should be able to get an accurate diagnosis if they're really pushing and advocating.
What should a teacher be looking for if we're gonna try to share information with our teachers, as we do right here?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely that daydreamy, looking out the window, having a hard time paying attention. Backpack can be a mess. I don't know if teachers actually look in the backpacks, but having a hard time finding homework even though they did it. Notebooks could be a mess. That trouble with keeping organized. Could be overly sensitive. On the positive side, maybe we'll mention a little bit later some of the positive ADHD, that overly sensitive also shows up as being very sensitive to others. There can be the girls in the class that reach out to, like, the girls that are not so popular, and try to bring them into the circle. I remember with my daughter, there was a girl that had broken her leg and was on crutches for many months, and she tried to find, like, they were playing during recess, try to find a game that they could all play that allowed her to play. So it's that being very, very sensitive. And
That's
there was
really nice.
yeah, another incident I remember, that they were doing some kind of, like, painting pottery in class, and everyone was given, like, this little rabbit, and they were going to paint it. And my a little girl got a rabbit that didn't have an ear, and she was crying because they were little girls, like 7, 8 years old.
Right.
And so my daughter switched with her. She switched with her and gave her
Very
the
sweet.
rabbit that had 2 ears. So, but it's that sensitivity to others, that's on the positive side. But because people focus on the negative, it shows up as that oversensitivity and being, maybe disproportionately sensitive to criticism.
Right, sure. So which brings us to our next subject, which is what challenges do women with ADHD have more so than men do in the realm of social interaction and social skills?
So I don't know if they have more challenges socially, but I think because women and girls crave social connection more than men, and
Right.
there's more social expectations
Yeah.
as far as girls and women, then it can have a bigger impact in that way. Like I think the challenges would be similar. The challenges like executive function wise, maintaining friendships with, staying focused in a conversation, noticing social cues because you're distracted can be harder. But I think it's more in the realm of like women and girls crave that acceptance so much more. So when they're not included, when they're feeling alone, when they're feeling different, the implications are greater for the girls.
Right. I mean, the skills, the issue regarding skills is exactly the same. It's just that the expectations in a group of girls are much higher with regard to how socially astute they're expected to be, and the sensitivity
Right.
levels are much higher.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, definitely. And I guess on the positive side, again, with the sensitivity, a lot of girls with ADHD and women with ADHD are the ones that they describe themselves, they're the good listeners. They're the people that, are really loyal friends, that they're really dedicated. They go above and beyond. They have the big hearts. They're empathetic. So that's on the flip side of, what they bring to a friendship that someone with ADHD may not to that same extent.
right. So, what skills can they learn? What can we do for them? The girls
So
from this
I think
situation.
the first thing is to be aware where your challenges are. Is it in time management, showing up to, events, getting get-togethers with friends? Is it in losing track of conversation? Is it in emotional regulation, getting overly angry or upset or even excited, like overly disproportionately excited to like the context? And, once you have that, you kind of start paying attention to, okay, where am I falling short? Where am I not meeting my own and my friends' expectations? And you can work on getting those resources and supports to work on those skills. But I think there's not like a blanket, like what could they work on? It's more individual to, where do they struggle? Where are they noticing the problems are? I hear from a lot of people today, like, that now, because a lot of communication is by text, that they have a really hard time keeping up with text, and people will their friends will be very upset with them because they're not returning texts, and that's a struggle because it's the executive function, it's the consistency, it's not a struggle that people had 20 years ago with friendship. Maybe then it was maintaining regular phone calls, but also because people have a lot of online, connections, which was not the case, 20 years ago. So that's a very different expectation than very different realm for working on friendship than it is when we're dealing with in-person friendships.
Right. It's a whole different forum of interaction.
Right. Right.
I find with ADHD and texting, it goes one of two ways. Either they're all over it and texting you back, bang, 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 or they're texting you back
Right.
2 days later. It's like either they're into it and then they're very into it, or they're
Right.
not into it at all and then they might have lost their phone, things like that.
Yeah, and that's right.
Right.
Right. Right. Lost their phone is definitely one of the challenges for sure.
Okay, what are the other unique challenges that women with ADHD have?
Yeah, so I think, for women, because the disproportionate amount of households and if they have children, child rearing responsibilities fall on them, even with, all the, feminism and different changes we've had in society over the last however many years, still in most households, the bulk of the cleaning, laundry, meal preparation, managing family appointments, falls on the woman, especially, if she's working outside the home or has a job within the home, a paying job in the home. They're dealing with a lot on their plate that requires a lot of executive function. And I even get back into like that women try to appear like everything is okay, that masking. So either they're being successful on the outside, but inside things are like chaos and they're feeling like burnt out, or they're feeling like ashamed and feeling like they're a failure because they can't keep up with all the things on their plate.
Right. And how are these challenges magnified in the Orthodox community?
So I think in the Orthodox community, there's even more of an idealized image of what a woman should be. Like the super mom who manages to run a huge household of a lot of kids, and she cooks amazing meals, and her kids are in matching clothes on Shabbos, and she has a freezer full of cakes to host the guests. And maybe she also does community work outside the house, and she does it all with a smile. And I think people have this image, and they try to live up to this image. I don't know if anyone is really like that, but
I
there's
do the
this
same thing.
image. And I think especially with social media, that even people are projecting images of this perfection that even magnified it even more.
Right.
The perfect cake, or their family on vacation, everything looks perfect. So I think that they struggle with that, like I was saying before, that feeling of, shame and embarrassment that they're not measuring up to what that is. And I think also that even though there's been a lot of advances in reducing stigma on mental health issues, whether it's ADHD or anxiety or depression or other mental health conditions, there's still a lot of stigma in society. And I think the Orthodox community is slower to catch up. I think it's improved for sure over the years, but there's still a stigma. And I think there's an embarrassment for most people. Whereas I think like at least in America, there are a lot more people being open about their ADHD, and we'll I think people are much more open about it in general, and you see it a lot with people in the media. But I think in the Orthodox community, it makes it even harder because there's still that stigma. So people are afraid to ask for help, or they're afraid it'll affect future marriage prospects for their children, or people will see them as less than. So I think there's still that fear of judgment and stigma, and it makes it much harder. It makes it much harder, and it can be much more isolating. You feel like you're alone in this because you're afraid to share.
Right. That's hard. What can we do for them?
So I don't know if there's an easy solution. I personally, would love to see. I have a free support group that I do on Meetup, which is open to men and women of all types with ADHD. But I would love to see a group, some kind of group coaching program from women, for Orthodox women, and a way for them to learn some of these skills and strategies at the same time. Even more so, I think what's even more powerful than that is the connection that comes from a group setting of people that are similar to you. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing about having these groups, is that you can realize that you're not alone, that you have that support, that people have similar struggles, and it lessens that burden, it lessens that feeling of isolation.
Right. Sure. Yeah, that's a big deal. Hopefully we can do the same with that right here. Is the fact that our community is very, what's the word I want to use, helpful of one another. Are there areas where, I guess, a woman who's struggling with this can take advantage, even if it's difficult to, disclose her diagnosis to friends? Are there areas where things are happening anyway that women can sort of, latch onto and take advantage of?
So there are a lot of amazing organizations in the Orthodox world. A lot, everything from medical systems through Hatzalah to, Bikur Cholim that deals with serious illness, and organizations that deal with illness in children. There are organizations that give you financial assistance. But I'm not aware of anything that would support an individual or a family dealing with ADHD on a regular basis. I know that there are things that maybe deal with consequences or byproducts of ADHD, maybe mental health support, or maybe marriage support, or job loss, or job coaching, things that might be connected to someone's ADHD. But as far as helping with ADHD directly, I'm not aware of any resources. And if you are aware of any, I'd be really thrilled to learn about them. Yeah, I really don't know of anything.
Right. Nothing's come to mind for me. I guess what I was, I guess, what I'm imagining is there's sometimes, neighbors take care of certain things for each other. I got carpool, you got that, so in those
Yeah.
situations, people help each other out, not specifically geared towards ADHD, but because in some areas of the community, people, cover for each other that way. Those opportunities exist, but they also require a certain level of executive function to participate.
Right, right. And I think that when you're dealing with close friends and family, there's always that extra support if we're talking about good, healthy relationships. Um, but yeah, there's no formal organization of support for ADHD that I'm aware of. And actually, a few years ago, I was speaking with a woman who was she was very active in a lot of organizations in the Jewish community, and she had come to me because her adult son needed coaching, and her son, thank God, was very successful in coaching. But we actually spoke together about creating an organization in the Orthodox community we didn't actually speak about the support piece so much. We were talking about creating more awareness among teachers, among therapists, among rabbanim, in general, and doing like a lot of informational webinars and things. It never really got off the ground because I had like a particular life circumstance that got in the way that I wasn't able to devote myself to that fully. But I actually bought the domain and had started to create a
Cool.
website for it. I still have the domain. I'm still paying GoDaddy because I'm thinking at some point I'd love to get this off the ground. We got this ADHD empowerment. It was meant to be like a one-stop, like resources for the Orthodox community, and support could be a great addition to that. If you know people that would want to be part of that, because it is a great idea, because there's not anything right now. Even just creating that awareness it would be a huge step to increasing that awareness, especially with inattentive ADHD, which is so often missed and has great consequences over the years when it's not diagnosed early. And another resource, and this is not in the Orthodox community, but I came across, there's an organization called Find the ADHD Girls. It was started by findtheadhdgirls.org, and it was created by a woman named Cynthia Hammer. I don't know if you've heard her name before, but
I'll
she's
her
a
on LinkedIn.
social
Yeah.
worker. Yeah, she's a social worker who was born in 1950, so that makes her like 75. And she had ADHD as a child, but of course, at that time, no one had any idea.
Right.
Even boys weren't being diagnosed then. And her parents thought something was really off with her, and they actually took her for a hospital for diagnosis, and they came up with nothing. They did blood work, they did all the typical tests, mental health. They didn't come up with anything, but she struggled for years. I think she was diagnosed at the age of 49, and because of her experience, because she struggled alone for so many years, she created this organization which has a lot of great resources if people want to check it out. I'm pretty sure it's the domain is findtheadhdgirls.org. There's a lot of amazing resources there, free resources. Yeah, and that could be helpful to parents. It could be helpful to teachers. But the idea of creating something with the Orthodox community is a dream of mine. It is a dream, and also I would love to have like as part of that, subsidies for coaching, for ADHD coaching for people, because I know that especially in the Orthodox community, when you're paying tuition and you're dealing with larger families, even if coaching could be extremely helpful, it's not always a financial option for many families.
Right. Sounds like two amazing ideas. Hope to hear more good things about that.
Yeah, one day.
Okay, sounds good. What are important things for family members to know, and how can family members help?
So I think, getting back to before what we were saying about how to spot ADHD, how the biggest thing is education. So I think having that ADHD, the broader ADHD education, find an interesting book to read about ADHD, go to some of the really informative sites like chad.org or ADA or Attitude Magazine, and start learning about ADHD, because so much of the negative consequences that girls and women, not just girls and women, anyone with ADHD suffer, is because of people don't really understand ADHD. So they're critical, they're blaming. Whereas if you understand ADHD better, you can treat them with more compassion, with more understanding. So that's one, that education could be a real game changer, and especially within the family dynamic. And to pay attention, like that, especially with girls and women, there can be that masking, that attempt to appear like everything's okay, even though it really isn't. And I think another thing to think about in the family situation, for family members, for loved ones, is to look at it from the strength-based perspective. And what that means is ADHD does have challenges, for sure. Difficulty with focusing and time management and emotional regulation, planning, organization. There's a whole list of executive functions that can be impacted by ADHD, but also there are so many amazing strengths that are part of that ADHD, the creativity, the sensitivity, as we were talking about before, that like that deeper emotional awareness, a sense of humor and playfulness, that loyalty we were saying before, those big hearts, the out of the box thinking, and that's all part of ADHD. So when we focus more on the strengths of who they are and less upon the areas they struggle with, I think that can be transformational. We all have strengths and weaknesses, whether we have ADHD or not. We all are, a package of strengths and weaknesses.
I always say people are packages.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying two layers here. Layer one is to self-educate on ADHD. Layer two is to appreciate the whole person. I guess I would add, as a conclusion to what you're saying, that once you've learned this, you know where you can be helpful. Once you know where they need help and why they need help, and
Right.
what the nature of that need is, you can chip in accordingly. Be
Yeah, and I
supportive
don't know if
accordingly.
it's right. And the other thing I'm thinking about, I don't know if it's Ross Green, but it doesn't matter if it's Ross Green or not. But so that they're not doing whatever behavior that you're finding difficult to deal with. It's not deliberate. They would if they could, is the expression. And if you figure out what that skill is that they're missing, and you get them the appropriate supports to learn that skill, then they can, all these areas, all the executive function areas can be improved upon and mastered, really. So the brain, we know the brain is neuroplastic. We can learn new things at any age. I've had clients, I have from up to age 73. People, and people make changes even after that. But I'm saying in my experience, and it's never too late to make changes and learn new things.
Right. Amazing. So speaking of which, what are some I guess sample strategies you've used to help women either run homes or kids get through high school? What do some of those look like?
Yeah, that's a hard question because we could probably spend weeks on this question.
We can.
But I would say, like, if I were to pick a few of like the biggest game changers, I'd say one is, people struggle with having that clarity, what they need to do. They might have a to-do list a mile long,
Sure.
but they just sit in front of it and they can be frozen. So to have that clarity, like, what is the most important thing I need to do today? Or what would have the biggest impact if I were to get it done today, or make me the most happy? And to focus on that one thing, and to then you can move on. But when you have that big list, can be so discouraging. And if you can, just get that, clear away like that noise and just focus on that one thing, it can help you to move on and to get started and to make progress. And that being said, that sometimes that one thing is a big project. It's clean the kitchen or straighten the garage or whatever it is, and that in itself could be overwhelming. And to take that thing, whatever it is, that project, and to break it down into a teeny step. Like, where can I start? If it's the kitchen, maybe it's just do one drawer. Maybe it's just do one shelf. If someone wants to start with planning meals every day, pick one meal. Pick one meal. Maybe you're going to make breakfast on Monday mornings or Sunday mornings because it's an easier day. Just start with something small that feels doable, and then the momentum, little by little, we can make changes. But I think that so many people with ADD get stuck with trying that all or nothing thinking, trying to take on the
Sure.
whole world at once, and then they maybe do it for like a day or two or a week, and then they're back to square one because it seems overwhelming. But it's the little teeny changes, little by little, that build momentum, and they could feel, once they feel doable, they can move forward.
Right, and that clarity you mentioned is also huge. Like you said, when there's the avalanche of things that need to get done, it just turns into like sounds a little more like a panic attack than a task list.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people come often to coaching and they're just so overwhelmed and life is so chaotic, and they just need to like clear that noise, and to just focus on what's the most important. Another strategy I really love, and this was not my creation, but I've passed it on to a lot of people. It's called the to-do list. Have you ever heard of that?
I feel like I've seen it mentioned, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. So it's so we think of a to-do list, right? So
Right.
the typical reaction at the end of the day, if someone has a to-do list and they look at it and they're like, I didn't get that done, I didn't get that done, I didn't get that done. And then instead of focusing on the 8 things they did do, they're focusing on the 3 things they didn't do. This idea of the to-do list is to go back to that list and think about or even write down all the things you did get done during the day. And some of the things, maybe may not even been on your list. Oh, I had to end up going down to the school because, Rebecca forgot her lunch. And, so like to make that list of all those things you did do, and then it gives you the feeling of accomplishment. And it's, when you focus on the negative, it's discouraging and it doesn't move you forward. But when you focus on the positive and those wins, even if they might be little, it produces that dopamine. It motivates you. Like motivation creates motivation. So when you focus on those little wins, that it helps you to create more of those wins.
Sure. Well, that's cool. I often tell people if they ended up doing something that wasn't on their to-do list or their planner or whatever, but that's what they ended up doing and they're glad they did it, write it in and check it off. So you plan now.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to do that. I still do that actually. And I thought it was like this weird thing that I did. And then I actually learned, was like part of my ADHD coach training, was that it's not so weird because checking it off gives you that little dopamine boost. And then it gives you the motivation to do that next thing. So I still do that occasionally, when I do a thing that was not on my original list. So it's definitely a great idea.
Right. Awesome. Okay. What is a message of hope you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
So to know that you're not alone and that it's not that you're broken or you're lazy. It always breaks my heart when people say to me, well, I'm really lazy. I'm really not disciplined. I'm really not motivated. That's your brain wiring. Your brain wiring's a little different, but if you learn to understand that brain wiring and learn to navigate the challenges connected with it in a way that works with your brain, then you can actually make huge changes and you can go from, that chaos to really thriving.
Right. Amazing. You know the Lazy, Stupid, Crazy book?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I've pulled it out just for dramatic effect because you show, you're speaking to teachers or whatever. You want them to know how people feel. You're like, this is how they feel. This is the message they're getting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of my personal goals, and I sometimes share this with clients, sometimes I don't, but is that people should have that mindset shift, that they should feel that they see more of their gifts than their challenges. Because I think when you're struggling, it's obvious. You feel all the things that are so hard for you, and you feel like a failure. But when you have those strategies to navigate the areas of challenge, then the gifts shine a lot more where they might have been buried before. So that my personal goal is, when people can get to that point and really embrace their strengths more so than struggling with their challenges.
Right. Well, that must be amazing. How can people get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way is through my website, Ascend with Aviva. There people can, I also have a lot of free resources. I have a blog. If people want more information, people can message me there. If people are interested in coaching, they could schedule a free consultation. And also if you want to email me, you can find my email there or my phone number.
Okay, perfect. We can get all that in the show notes. Is there anything else you wanted to mention today?
I think, to view ADHD not just as a diagnosis, but more as a lens that we can use for understanding yourself or your loved one. And that really creates a whole new perspective. When you learn that it's the brain is working differently, but it's not a deficit. And when people can be comfortable being who they are, like take off that mask and be who they are authentically, when they learn those strategies to navigate the areas that are difficult for them, and they can really just thrive. It's not, sometimes parents or adults struggle with that diagnosis of ADHD, but I think it's positive because it gives you that lens for self-compassion, and it gives you a way forward to get the tools and support you need to be your best self.
Right. Wow. Such a nice idea. Okay. Aviva Nirenberg, thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a nice conversation.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, You can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.